All right, welcome to the Genius Mastermind, everyone. It is September. We're coming into the final stretch of the year. Hope you're all doing well. Rex is traveling. He's currently well, I guess he's only an hour and a half away from his house, but he's doing an event today on health, which is pretty exciting. So I hope that goes well. We'll be excited to hear about that from him. And today we have the honor of Gary leading today. So I'm excited for Gary. He's going to be talking about strengths. And I think it should be, you did strengths of remote work, but I think we should replace it almost like strengths versus remote work. Could be something like that. So take it away, Gary.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Nathan. And hi, everybody. Just for the record, this is not a group I get stressed out in front of. I mean, you guys are you're like family. So this is okay for me. I enjoy doing this. And even though it was kind of a last minute request, you know, I'm always anxious to get input on things that I'm working on. So I look at it as an opportunity to see what these brilliant minds can offer in terms of looking at strengths and how our knowledge of strengths might be helpful to people in this whole return to office equation, which is one of the biggest business problems that we've seen in our lifetime. 3 years ago, remote work became a solution to this incredible problem we'd never faced before, which was a pandemic, and it got us through. Well, now that solution is today's problem. So it's just very interesting that we as problem solvers find ourselves in the position of fixing something that we kind of, people like us created, which is this idea of remote work and all the technology that allows it. So I've been spending a lot of time on it. And 3 years ago, one of the clients that Rex introduced me to a couple years prior asked me, they're a firm of 200 people and they had done strengths for everyone. So they had the data. So the question was, can we use this data to tell us who was going to take well to remote work and who isn't? And in the process of doing that, we discovered two things. Not only does strengths tell us a lot about who's going to be okay working remotely and what kind of challenges will they have, but also kind of the reverse side, which is who do we really need to be around, and do we need people to be around because they tend to engage others, they tend to mobilize people, and they tend to create activities and the ability to get things done through others. So you have those two things kind of competing with each other: the ability to work remotely and how well will somebody do, and not just with productivity, but will they stay connected? Will we be able to maintain our culture and our DNA as people are remote? So there's all those things. And then there's I call it kind of the ringleader phenomenon, of the people who have the ability to gather people and get stuff done in groups and socialize and collaborate and just do good and fun things that are work related and not work related, that kind of are big part of people's culture. What do we do about that, and how can we create that kind of sense of interaction and belonging when people are remote so often? So I basically took the information we had on people's top fives and drew a profile based on people's quadrants. At the time we were looking at core clarity, so we based it on quadrants, and we can have the same conversation today about rings, relating, thinking, acting, and motivating. And depending on where people's strengths were, it had a lot to do with their fitness, what I would call their fitness, and their tolerance of remote work. And we validated all of this because we had kind of a three-step process. Maybe it was more than three, but I basically looked at their strengths and said, these strengths tell me this person is going to be fine working alone. They've got a bunch of green talents. They're an includer, so I think they'll probably stay connected to the team. So whatever the strengths told me is what I did. And then we had the HR person kind of weigh in and say, well, this person's job is specific to X, so based on their strengths and their job, these are the things that are going to be challenges. So there are certain jobs that lend themselves to remote work and certain jobs that don't. So they weighed in. And then we had the supervisor weigh in to say, based on these assessments of HR and this consultant, does this ring true? And are there any other factors? And then we came up with a couple of things like the level of the environment they were in at home or wherever it is they were working. Did they have good ergonomic tools? Did they have the ability to have quiet when they needed quiet? Did their internet provider provide the right kind of bandwidth so they could do all these calls all the time? And so we really looked at technology and then the actual logistics of people working somewhere else. And we put it all together and we created a remote work score. And basically anything in the middle was, they're probably going to do okay with proper supervision. And anything on the ends where this person's going to need help because they're not going to stay connected, or this is somebody we really need to be around. So how do we find a way to get them in more often as people start to come back and we do our 2 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever? How do we tap into this more? So I just wanted to give that as a backdrop to get you guys thinking about how strengths and our knowledge of strengths can really help people deal with this. Because from my point of view, as I've been asking potential clients and clients over the past year or so, what is the biggest challenge you have right now? Really return to office and getting people in and figuring out their policies and figuring out their real estate strategies are right at the top of their list. And all that relates to attraction and retention. So all these things are I've kind of balled up and call it RTO. It's really all about that. So I want to stop here and ask a question and kind of say, have you guys thought about this connection? What do you think of the connection between strengths and RTO? And what might you be able to add to this conversation? Because I think we have some tools at our disposal. And what other tools are you aware of that can kind of help us figure this out? So I just want to stop and say, okay, strengths, where people work, how they work. Have you used this? Have you thought about it? So I would just like to get your input because I think it'd be really valuable. So I'm not going to go around the room. Let's free flow it. Speak up. You guys are capable of speaking up. I've seen y'all before. Speak up.
So Gary, if I could take the first swing at bat, and I'd like to chat with you offline about this as well, because just to remind you, my last role at Google was working with our workplace team. Yep. I think there are two parts of your question, really, right? Mm-hmm. There's one, which is, what are the personalities that can be successful or thrive in this asynchronous reality, right? But underlying all this too is what's the value of the workplace? And I think the calculus for people now is like, I was able to do my job successfully. Why do I need to come in, right? So the rationalization side of all of this, the organization needs to take very intentional efforts to not just describe in platitudes like, oh, it's better for your career, but like, what's the value of this connectedness? How is that going to translate into better outcomes? And it can't just be very nebulous, like, hey, we have this project, we know that our data shows that blah, blah, blah. Like, you have to approach it from a very objective perspective and not very hand-wavy. Most businesses aren't prepared to do that. Then there's this also reality that if you're somewhat of a cynic, right? Like, businesses want people to go back to work because they're stuck paying a really expensive real estate bill that they can't get out of. And no one wants to talk about that. And if they just said, like, we're paying a bunch of money, we want to use it, you'd probably get more people showing up. But no one wants to actually say the real reason. But that's my 2 cents. You know, I think on the personality side, people who are these super connectors struggle. That's what I've seen. I like to call them the huggers. The people who love to hug have struggled big time. Dan's smiling, so I think Dan's a hugger.
I'm not, but I know what you're talking about.
Great take. Since you have the floor, Dan, let's hear what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I think, you know, teaching communication and haptics, recognizing that humans need touch. It sort of goes right in with what Eric was just saying. And I think that, I don't know, like I don't know of a solution to it, of course, but I do think that there has to be some sort of scenario in which human touch is happening, like shaking hands, that type of thing. Additionally, I saw something somewhere, of course I don't remember the source of it, but was talking about how the work from home phenomenon is shifting people's locus of community from their workplace to where they actually live, in their suburbs or wherever. And with that happening, Nick Bloom does a lot of stuff puts a lot of stuff out about work from home. And with that happening, it's less and less likely that we're talking about a 5-day in the office work week for work that can be done on the computer at home. So I don't know how that applies to strengths, but I think those that are less green, those are the ones that really need to have those haptic connections that help give connection and meaning.
Yeah.
And then of course, if they're getting that connection and meeting through civic groups and social environments in their locations, wherever they're living, as opposed to getting that at work, it's going to be very difficult for an employer to make the argument that you need to come in.
I'll add on to, I think I read that article. I was going to say I wrote it, but you wouldn't have known.
You might have. I never remember my sources.
I think I read it, and I think what he said further was, not only is the center of their community shifted from work related to home, their identity has completely shifted.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference. We think of ourselves, what do you do? Who are you? Well, I'm an attorney. I'm an accountant. People don't think that way anymore. I mean, they sort of do, but especially younger workers and anybody who started working anytime around COVID, they don't think of themselves that way at all. So the whole identity and sense of community has shifted from the office and everything in it being the center of your universe to it just being a piece. So that was a good point.
Yeah, I did a training with a company where they were remote before the pandemic. So it is such a normal thing for them. And I talk about work from home, and they just sort of looked at me like, well, I mean, it's what we do. So it's interesting too in different company cultures. Yeah,
there's a lot of times you'll hear people in this group refer to the company Meteor, and Rex has written books with Bill Latham. I've worked with them, Joseph, Kurt. A lot of us have done work with Meteor. Meteor has been a remote company since basically their inception, and they're a great example of how to build a culture remotely. So if anybody wants to know who's a good source of that information, there's a lot of us in this group that have connections to Meteor. They're a great example of how to do it.
I'll take a shot at it, Gary.
Hey, Stan.
Hello. So yeah, my past life at Wells Fargo, I did the same thing kind of you did, Eric. And I had a team that was in charge of the real estate strategy domestically and a little bit offshore. So yeah, it's been an evolution. I mean, I come back from the day not that long ago where getting people out of a cube and calling that my cube was absolutely, I mean, crazy to think of. People own that cube. They like that cube. They didn't want anybody else sitting in that cube. Excuse me. And so anyway, we got past that, and we started looking at work by task. And we started saying, it's no different than a library. When you were in college, you can study in your dorm room. You can go to the library where you're going to be around some other people, have some socialization, probably working on a group project. You're going to be able to pull 4 or 5 people together. That's easy to do in a library. And then there's also some socialization. Hopefully you go to the bars afterwards, you do stuff like that. You want to create that library type environment to me at work, regardless of whether you're in the green side, the orange side, I think for me personally, my team was scattered across the country. So we were already, whether we were in an office or not, we were remote because we weren't working together unless we were on a Zoom call. But I pulled them together on a quarterly basis, face to face, and they got a tremendous amount of energy. I mean, we spent 2 to 3 days locked up working, and these were people that were pure green. These were people that were pure relational. These were people that were feeding off of each other. I think the collaboration you get by that in touch thing, you can't duplicate that online. I do not believe that. And I'm not saying it's an either or. I don't think you have to be in the office 5 days. I don't think, there's certain types of tasks, call centers. I argued for years, why do we have to have people all in a location? They said, well, the technology didn't allow it. Well, pandemic happened within 30 days. We had technology and they were all handling every call from home. And so there are no barriers, in my opinion. I think it's not industry specific. You got to look at what works, like you're doing, Gary. And my 2 cents on this is I do believe there's a time and a place to be together. Doesn't have to be 5 days a week, but I believe whether it's quarterly, whether it's coming in 2 days a week, I too used to got some helpers that are going to come out here in a second. You probably see my grandsons. Sorry about this. They're looking around the corner at who is that weird guy. But I guess the point is it's not industry specific, Gary, from my perspective. I think, you've got to look at the task, you got to look at the people, but I do think you have to come together quarterly, or if you're going to be in the same location, at least come together 2 to 3 times a week. And you've got to make sure that they come together at the same time. You can't have people come in and nobody's there. That's like going to a party and you're the only one that showed up. I think that collaboration is huge.
Great. You can engage your guest there, Stan. We're gonna shift to someone else. I want to add something. At one end of the spectrum, and this is company's point of view. If a company has a really people-centric vision of the world and really care about people, their point of view is probably something like this. We believe that the younger workers are falling behind because they don't have the opportunity to create their own networks. They don't have the opportunity for knowledge exchange that they're getting from the older, more experienced workers. So we're doing everyone a disservice by not having them come together. On the other end of the spectrum is somebody like Jamie Dimon, who you can quote about once a week on why we need to be in the office 5 days a week. But the truth of the matter is that his firm probably has the lion's share of commercial real estate loans that exist in the world. It is to their benefit that people occupy commercial real estate. So that is their need, whether they really care about how work gets done. And they're saying things like people are more productive and all the other things I said, but they're all about more productivity, better experience, human touch, all that. But the truth is they have an agenda, and their agenda is it's to their benefit for people to come back to the office. So you got to look at that a little bit with a grain of salt. But there's a lot of truth to the other side. Anyway, so I just wanted to point that out because there's that whole spectrum of views about why we want people back and why employers want people back in, whether it's 2 days a week or whatever. And it runs the whole gamut. Pamela? I can see the wheels turning. You got
Yeah,
something?
lots of thoughts, self-thoughts, my husband's office and my own career, and even a client, a prospective client, an old client, Fannie Mae, who's got a huge building down in Dulles Corridor that's 25% full. And they're trying to motivate employees by giving them a dedicated space. It's very basic, kind of approach, like, oh, we're going to do this and that'll take care of it, right? And as you're speaking, I'm realizing as a coach now, finally got my certification, there is this lack of awareness of why I stay home, why I go to work now. We just do. And I'm trying to also sit in the seat of a woman with children. My kids are almost launched now, but that what COVID gave them was a bit of more balance in their roles. And I'm talking not just women, but men and women who have various age children who, get out of daycare before the 5 o'clock hour or what have you. Right. So they've gotten some benefits out of this. So, what's the opportunity cost for a lifestyle that has changed for these remote workers who never worked remote before. I've been working remote for over 20 years for a tech company, whether it was IBM or Peregrine or where I am now. I had access to offices over the years, but most of my time has been in my home. And I agree to everything Stan said. Like, there's nothing that you do need that face to face, whether it's at a conference or quarterly meeting. But I really think that you're onto something with the questioning. I mean, obviously tying strengths and being able to see the benefits, the pros and cons, and who people are naturally likely to be successful remotely. But as somebody who's an activator, achiever, learner, empath, connector, I've been used to doing a lot of work remotely. I don't need any motivation. But when I go into my husband's office, I'm getting something out of that. I'm getting connection, and I'm actually getting more balance than I am at home, because I'm a taskmaster at home, whether it's, whereas in the office, it's like, oh, I can talk to this person at the water cooler, or I can have a different discussion, or I could have a new idea from somebody else's perspective. So I think it's a complicated, but I think this RTO, you're onto something here. And in Derek's firm, he's really struggling with, there are some that come in and some that don't. And there's one that's like super bright, a leader in the office, and he's gotten used to having, the flexibility as a child caretaker too at home, and they're missing him. So it's kind of like having that awareness discussion as a small office of 12 people. What are we getting at home, and what are we getting in the office, and what are we losing as architects by not collaborating more, and how does this impact our clients, and how can we learn more from each other and also do better as an organization. I think putting it in those terms, instead of this is the policy, let's try this, let's try that, it's a conversation that needs to keep happening, I think. Anyway.
Totally agree. And I'm gonna, when we're done with this portion of the program, I'm gonna present to you a program and a methodology that I'm bringing to firms like architects to help them address it in their own shops, and then to be able to address it with their clients. Architects are one of the vertical markets that are 100% aligned in the fact that they don't believe, and this is the managing partners and the partners and the leaders, they don't believe they can do their work with people dispersed. They believe they need to have a truly collaborative environment to be as effective as they can be. Whether that means 3 days a week or whatever, but they are absolutely convinced that people need to come together for them to provide decent services at all. So there are, and even in accounting, where you would think that, wow, that's one field that a lot of work can be done remotely, they're clamoring to get their people back in the office too. So it's just interesting which verticals lend themselves to it better and which don't. But I think architecture is one that very consistently is suffering if people are not around.
I would argue too, in the technology software space that I'm in, we've suffered. We've cut back on travel as a team, as a company, and the politics at the top, the dysfunction at the top is clear. It's not been improved. It's been worsened by this dissonance, this lack of connection, doing everything remotely, not sitting around a table together for a couple hours.
And between the meeting, right after that meeting, sitting together, what's right afterwards is probably, and in the hallway is probably more important than in the meeting.
Yeah, the meeting after the meeting is where all the work gets done.
That's where decisions are made.
I'm not doing that, are you?
I'll share a couple thoughts if it's okay.
Please.
So strengths were around before COVID. Everyone had strengths and a set and a profile, and they're here today. So that hasn't changed. Nothing's changed. Right now, people may be adapting or applying them in different ways. Maybe kryptonite's coming out here instead of there, and yet they were there in 2019. So that's not a big difference. The world changed, but not people. So I often like to think about and suggest that we don't look at, there's no one right answer for return to the office or stay at home. There's no one right answer. And there's not one right answer for a company. My advice to clients and to others who inform clients is I like to look at the work group. where one company or one work group may need to be in the office, and architects may be one of those examples. Or in a larger company, one work group, one function may need to be in the office where others don't. So why does it have to be a broad brush decision? There's more than one right answer. There are many right answers to work from home or work remote, and that can even go to the individual level. Now, how do you manage all that so people don't go, well, that's not fair, because they get to go, wherever? Those are questions. Those are different solutions, though, different ways to approach the same question. So more than one right answer, more than one approach. Why try to find what is the answer? I just read too that Generation Z wants to be back in the office. Now that's a broad brush stereotype, but that's what they want to be there. They never got the chance to work in the office and feel like they're missing out. So anyway, that's just a couple thoughts off the top of my head as we have this dialogue.
Good take.
I guess one thing, because like I'm 100% remote, as you guys know, like I work for Rex, and then Kayla and I have social media clients and help people and stuff. So one thing that's helpful for me is touch points, because it feels like I get spun up in my own head if I'm left alone. And so like Rex will call me after an event and be like, hey, here's what happened. Here's what was bad. Here was good. Here's where we're going to make adjustments. And so touch points with Rex help me feel connected to like the overall goal of Mindshift, like his company. And so just like making sure that there's touch points and staying connected, because sometimes it is hard. Like I feel like I'm on an island sometimes. And so making sure touch points and getting together, like Kayla and I, whenever we go to Texas to visit my family, we'll go down to Rex's ranch and hang out with Rex and Lisa for a few hours and go have lunch and stuff. And so just, yeah, having those continual touch points have been really helpful being in the mountains.
Yeah, I think that's important. Otherwise, the only narrative you hear is the one inside your head. And that's dangerous for all of us.
Exactly.
Eric, you got something?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of follow up on one comment you made about the architects, because I obviously I too work a ton with architects. And this also goes to your Jamie Dimon comment about like, they own large portion of real estate. So one thing that has served me well is helping people look at things through the lens of behavioral economics. I don't know if people are familiar with this concept, but in the end, everyone makes decisions, whether consciously or subconsciously, with fundamentally financial incentives in mind, right? The problem is very few people will ever admit this, because it's an ugly thing to admit, right? The what's in it for me. And so with the architects in this context, if you go talk to an architect about how to solve this problem, the answer is, of course, always design something. You go talk to a general contractor how to solve this problem. The solution's always, we need to go build something. And this group too, much like being a consultant, what's the solution? Talk to us. We'll help figure your problem. So at the end of the day, the people that have the answers, you have to almost like peel back and say, what's not in my interest? It's almost the inverse of this, to figure out how to advance this conversation with a very honest perspective, right? Because the answer might be is you should do nothing. It makes no sense to reconfigure your space, or it makes no sense to actually keep this office, or unload it. Having those conversations almost requires a 180-degree turn from what you assume to be true. It's almost like, why should I not do this? Because I think most people, and this isn't to say that they're bad people by any stretch of the imagination, but I think most people like never really uncover the real reason for why they think something. It's like the 5 whys, right? You ask the 5th why, you finally get the answer. So, in the Jamie Dimon situations, yeah, they have a ton of real estate, and yeah, they hold a lot of loans, and yeah, it's in their interest to have business done in the office because they're on the hook. And in the example given earlier, yeah, well, that business has never been in the office, so why would they go build an office, right? So I think you have to really step back and figure out what are the objective criteria, and get the firms to actually come up with what their objective criteria, like how do they define success?
I think one of the things that you learn when you keep up with this stuff and you read multiple articles every day, and everyone has a different take. And recently there's been a lot of articles saying people are going back. It's going to happen. They're going back to the office. Maybe it won't be everybody 5 days a week, but it's happening, and the pendulum is swinging in that direction. And I was having this conversation with my wife, and she's like, why are you so sure that it's never going to happen? Because it's never going to happen. Okay. And I said, one word: economics. And the reason is, a lot of people have figured out how to not only survive, but thrive with 50% of the real estate that they used to occupy. Why do I want to spend that money? I could spend, of that 50% savings, I could spend 20% of it on employee-centric programs and create the best culture known to man and still be way ahead in the game. So the smart people are going to figure out how to do with less real estate unless there's an economic reason for them not to. And that's really why everybody should be fairly confident that hybrid is here to stay. Maybe it'll be 75% back in the office someday. I don't think it'll ever go beyond that. Maybe that, but probably not beyond that. So why is this of interest to us as consultants? And why does Strength maybe have a position in this conversation? And it kind of is about the fact that this is a very classic conflict of values. The individual is at conflict with the corporation. The corporation has a need to bring people back together. It wants to collaborate. It wants to do knowledge transfer. It believes that people will be and can be more productive. And there's a lot of evidence and there's a lot of research that says they're right. The individuals have learned, I can do my job, I can do my dry cleaning, I can pick up my kids, I can participate in my children's life, I can participate in my family life better, I can participate in the social life differently. They think of themselves to, I forget who it was that made the point earlier, their whole social center of the universe has changed. And they don't view work and the place of work and what we call the built environment, they don't look at it the same way. So this is a classic conflict of individual principles and values versus company principles and values. That's what we do. We get involved with conflict. That's why a lot of people hire us for our expertise. So this is a conflict that's here to stay. And all of you are well versed in strengths. And I think the research has shown there's something to this. And maybe if we just spark a conversation today that you take somewhere else and bring back to the group 6 months from now, I think it'd be interesting to see. If I can, I'd like to share my screen and show you of a model I came up with, because I think it touches on a lot of the points that were made, especially some of the points that Rob made, that there isn't one size fits all. There isn't an answer to this. Don't seek an answer. So let's see if I can share my screen. If I can find what it is I'm looking for. Desktop. It's different when it's yours than when it's mine, Nathan. This is what I was afraid of. Taking me a minute. Let's see if I can.
I have it automatically set. You should be able to share it pretty easily.
Okay, let's see what it gives me when I go back to it. Could just be user error, you know. Here it is. Okay.
There we go.
As an answer to this equation, which is the whole RTO equation, I've created this methodology and toolkit called Balanced Workplace. And it's designed to be a tool to service providers like architects, real estate people, furniture folks, contract furniture folks, the world that Rex and I both came from. I just lost your pictures. Let me just get you guys back. There we go. So I'll explain how it works. The idea and the goal is to help people create workplaces that people choose to go to, not have to go to, but choose to go to. So the issue of choice is key. So it starts with the physical, the bottom of the pyramid. For those of you familiar with Lencioni, I took his pyramid and said, let's take the same principles with the dysfunctional team and talk about what's foundational and how do you move up the pyramid to get to nirvana. And at the top of this chart is superior workplace experience. At the bottom is the physical space attributes, meaning you have to have a space that works for people. It has to be safe. And if you talk to building owners, construction companies, architects, furniture companies, this is where they all start. And this is sometimes where they finish. And we have the best HVAC systems. It's got this kind of special filter. We've got a rooftop lounge. We've got all these amenities in the space. You can work out here. You can do everything here. And they focus on the physical. I will tell you, this model focuses on the psychological. And that's what is different about it, and what is different from what architects and a lot of folks are saying is the solution to RTO. The next thing you need is integrated technology. Everything from the simple Zoom rooms, or how are you doing meetings for people that are here and not here all at the same time? Does the technology support everything? It has to. But there's a second level of technology that some of you might be familiar with and some of you might not be. And it's an emerging type of technology that deals with everything from reserving you a space to work. So it's a booking system. And the most highly evolved systems that do this will tell you things like space utilization, what rooms are being utilized, who is using what space. Are your 8-person conference rooms being sat in by 3 people or more? Do I need more small spaces, more big spaces? It also will take information about people's preferences and create actual events around them. For example, one of them catalogs your personal interests, and it will say, hey, in this office on Tuesday, there's 20 people who share a love for soccer, and there's a big soccer match. So at 5 o'clock in conference room B, we're having a cocktail party. We're going to have a little happy hour thing. And it will suggest or create events around people's likes and preferences because they know people need a reason to come to that space. So it creates reasons based on people's likes and dislikes. And there's a constancy to the surveying of information and what we call data capture. So I think Eric had mentioned before something about data-driven decisions, or at least inferred that we are moving much more towards a data-driven decision-making dynamic in the workplace. And so there are tools, and they're very sophisticated, and they're very new, and they're not terribly expensive, but they are fledgling and they're new. So there's fits and starts with new technology, but it exists and it's being used on a large scale. For example, Gensler's LA office uses technology that does what I just described, and they're testing. So what you have is now you have real data about what's happening with people. How are they using the space? How are they liking what they use? Do they like this kind of vignette? Do they have the heads down kind of places to work with and have quiet when they need it? Are they participating in things? Are they engaged? And then you take all that data and you start analyzing it, and it tells you what you should do next. And so the next layer beyond the data analytics is the commitment to what we call an iterative, human-centric process. Iterative meaning you're constantly reiterating it. So you never settle, you never solve the problem. You never reach nirvana. You're always looking at what can we do differently? How are things changing in our workplace based on how people are using the space, what they're saying about it? Are they happy? Are they unhappy? Are they coming in more? Are they coming in less? What's happening on Fridays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, all of those things. And what are we doing about it? So ideally, what we're recommending is a kind of a co-creation atmosphere between the company or the organization and the users to figure out what is this data telling us and how do we make changes in the space over time to make it more desirable. And the goal is to make it desirable, not to tell people to come there. And if you're able to do this, and if you have a constant feedback loop and you're constantly generating data, getting data to the right people, and have a co-creation atmosphere between the users and the management, we believe you can create a superior workplace experience. And if you do that, you probably, if you have the right people, they'll come in from time to time, and there'll probably be exceptions to that. But in general, this is what we believe is the formula to create spaces that people want to come to. Now, it's not going to solve all the problems, but it's going to give you an ability to take a more human-centric approach. And the more information you have about the psychology of the worker, the better. So the tool that we were using at Sarah Architects before, which tells you people's general readiness for remote work or whether they'll tolerate it, that's one tool. There are other psychology tools that people are using, and there's other survey tools that people are using to gauge the attitudes and the kind of the zeitgeist of what people are experiencing through the built environment. So just wanted to lay that out for you guys and say, this is an approach that I'm taking, and it's just being launched. I've got an architect and a furniture dealer that are ready to talk seriously about it right now, because they know this is what their clients are struggling with, and it's what they're struggling with. So how do you go to a client and tell them how to solve a problem if you're having to mandate people come in 3 days a week in your own shop? That's not very credible. So you got to solve it at home first. So really what we're doing is saying, you got to figure out how to implement this, be your own guinea pig, establish your workplace as what we call an innovation lab, a place where you're always testing things, what works, what doesn't work. And then you can represent to your clients, we live like this. We know what it's like. We know what it is we're asking you to do, and we know it works. So anyway, that's my spiel about balance. And, in this presentation is this tool that we used, and I know it's kind of blurry here. I could probably bring up a clearer version, and I have to kind of protect the individuals, but it's in color is the strengths, and then it's, profiling the person for remote work. It's additional input by their supervisor, by HR, and then it characterizes the quality of their remote environment and those kinds of things. So those are the tools I had at my disposal. I know there's lots more out there. I know there's lots you guys are aware of, but I really welcome the opportunity to share this with you and get some feedback. So there it is.
Hey, Gary, my 2 cents on that. I like the pyramid. And I think maybe to Eric's point, I think, when you start to prove up a return on investment or a return on human capital is when you start to probably have enough information to have a logical conversation. For as long as I've been speaking on this, which has been 10 years, even before the pandemic, I always used to call it the 10-hour proposition. And what I mean by that is by the time someone gets up in the morning and, takes a shower, gets ready for work, gets the kids off, does this, does that, don't want to profile, but there's a lot that goes into getting ready for work and a commute. Let's just say that it's an hour. You got a reverse commute, so now you got 2 hours. And now you've got added information that I've never even used before, like some of the, lunchflation, people are saving money by eating at home. And, there's all kinds of, childcare, this and that. Anyway, there's a huge expense reduction just by no commute, the time, the money, and what you get that organizations have to deal with. So that to me is the 10-hour proposition. You have to show that it is worth that 10 hours to do all that. You're going to get more when you come in the office. And it is worth, in fact, you can't wait to get in the car because there is something there that you can't get at home. And your pyramid kind of gets into that. I can tell you, I did both because I used to spend 6 months remote in a different location. And then I would come back to Des Moines where the headquarters was, and I would go in. And when I went into Des Moines, I got excited because we had technology that I could take the analytical people. I mean, we would just see each other and say, hey, that's a great idea. Let's shoot in this conference room and let's put it up on an interactive board and let's do some pretty cool stuff. And in fact, let's call somebody in from Denver and get their 2 cents. Couldn't do that as much on a Zoom. I mean, it was just so intuitive. So you got to sell that stuff that you've got in that pyramid to get past that that what I call the 10-hour proposition, which is now even more than that because of, again, the other things I mentioned, like childcare, lunchflation, and all the other things. So just my 2 cents, but I love your
There's
I love your pyramid.
an oversimplification of that, just that people call earn the commute. You know, it's not the whole 10-hour thing, but it's the 2 or 3 hours on both sides of it that, you know, you're adding, plus you're adding some of the economic issues as you described. You know, earn the commute. Same thought process. And, you know, one of the things I didn't mention, if you guys are interested at a later date, I can do a demo of some of this technology. Rob, I think, talked about groups. This technology allows you to see who on my team, and you can create whatever teams you want and make them big, small. Who on my team is going to be in the office today, or is going to be in the office Tuesday? Or if you have multiple offices, which office is my team going to be in, or members of my team going to be in this day or that day? And then you can choose, that's where you're going to work, pick a desk or what kind of environment you need to work in, and make a choice about who you want to be with. And that sense of belonging to a team is something you can really generate. You can also expose or hide your personal preferences to people who don't want to share everything that's private. You can hide those things to people except in your immediate team, or however it is you want to expose your personal preferences and your personal hobbies and whatnot. So it's the technology allows you to do quite a lot to either make your world smaller or make it bigger. Eric.
Thanks, Gary. One thing that I've been encouraging people to talk about, I'm actually writing something on this as well. The reason why hybrid has struggled to really take off in a very systematic way is that businesses have not restructured how they approach their own work week, right? And what I mean by that is all the activities, Stan, that you're alluding to, like we have not condensed them intentionally into the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we have not intentionally said Monday and Fridays are your heads down days. Like, people seem really hesitant on this. Like I've seen organizations that have said, we're going to have no meeting Fridays or no meeting Mondays. It sticks for a few months, right? And I feel like businesses have a huge opportunity here in being very intentional on hey, we know that coming together, we're going to focus on these interpersonal things. And everyone needs the ability to go get stuff done too. We're going to push those activities to the edges, right? I feel like the first business that actually does this and is very public about it is going to have a home run. Because I think that's what's missing with all this too, is that acknowledgement that, yeah, you can't do work the same way 5 days a week. And I think people are struggling trying to do that rather than embracing it.
Yeah, I think there's a fundamental shift in how work is being done and what the workplace represents. And that's why a lot of people in the business are correcting me every time I use these terms, saying, no, it's the built environment. So the built environment is a way of looking at things differently, because the workplace is anywhere and it's everywhere. So what does it really mean? And you're also describing something as basic as companies have not come up with a basic real estate strategy as to what do they really believe? Do they believe they want everyone under one roof in one place 5 days a week? Is that their belief, or is it something else? And we've gotten a lot of data about hub and spoke is the way to go. The inner cities are not where you should locate your office. It should be the suburbs, easier commutes. People have a shorter time to get there. That's a better way to do it. So there's lots of different ways to address this, but a lot of people haven't even started with the basics, which is what is our philosophy of how we want to work and where we want to put our spaces that we ask people to come to. So it's a whole new way of thinking about work and the workplace and the role of the built environment. And everyone's, regardless of what you may read or who tells you what, everyone is struggling. It's a mess. There are very few companies feel like we got it right. And there are companies that get it better than others. And they tend to be companies like Meteor, which has always been remote. And this hasn't been any kind of a change for them. But aside from those companies, it's all over the place, and they need help, and they need help from people like us to deal with this conflict, because it's a very real conflict of values. And that's why we are really promoting a co-creation dynamic between worker and leader and organization, because otherwise you're not going to have good answers to things like, well, I'm saving $20 a week on this, I'm saving another $20 a week on that, and then there's the commute and you know, I need to address this. And the companies can say, well, yeah, but we don't have the productivity we need. So having a co-creation type of environment, I think, is necessary to solve this. Because if you look at one point of view without the other, you're going to have what we have. And it's wonky. And it's not stable. And in this kind of labor market, people are clamoring for the right equation to attract and retain. And what is the role of the workplace itself or the built environment in that? And people are all over the place. So it's something for us to think about, and what kind of tools do we have to help people with it? And I do believe there's a role for strengths and the kind of psychology around how people are wired as to how they do in different environments and why. So we have that knowledge. I just love to see how we bring it to bear on this problem and challenge over time. And my time's kind of up. I really appreciate the platform to get some of this out there and to get everybody thinking about it. And the input and the feedback is great. You guys are certainly wired into what's going on with your clients and with the world of work. So I think together we can come up with some solutions to this. So as people find them, please bring them to the group so we can hear about it. Love to hear about it more. And appreciate the time, Nathan. Even though you screwed up the Zoom thing, I don't know what the hell happened.
I still don't know how that happened. I literally copied and pasted it over, but whatever. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Gary, for stepping up and leading. Rex is going to be gone for the next 3 weeks. So I'm going to be filling the spots. So if you would like to lead a mastermind over the next few weeks, please reach out to me. I'm reaching out to a few people. I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next week. And always, if you have any questions or need anything with your teams, please reach out to me. So thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.